I think ultimately the book is about the stuff we wish we had known when we were starting out. The younger generation today has so many opportunities, Shiv, that none of us could have imagined when we were young. At the same time, the kind of challenges they're dealing with, whether it's mental health, whether it is social media, whether it's uncertainty, make things so much more complex. I think at the junior stage in the first few years of one's career, the two biggest mistakes we've seen people make is...
I think, I'll reflect on some of the mistakes I've made and I talk about it in the book as well. I think in the early part of the career, the mistake was to assume too much self-importance. And therefore operate from that model of, you are sort of the center of the world and everything has to work as per you. And that didn't obviously work out too well because it ended up pissing a whole lot of people, right? So that is in the early stages.
Sometimes it's important to take a step back. And Shiv, as you were saying, given extended lifespans, if people are planning for 3 major phases of careers, a couple of years here or there doesn't make that much of a difference. And sometimes I think people get so focused on what will happen to my promotion trajectory, I'll fall behind my peers, that they don't necessarily take those actions. But sometimes being able to take a step back actually can really propel you much more forward, I think. So I think that's a critical tool which will get more and more necessary.
So lovely to be here, Vivek and Sunder. Thank you very much, Mohit, for inviting me here. So question, why am I here? I'm here because for a number of reasons. Mohit is an old pal, and I think what he's doing to develop the habit of reading is absolutely fantastic. I think reading habit is dying. He's one of the few guys like Don Pixar tilting at the window, trying to make people read. People don't even read what's on their LinkedIn or social post properly. And to get somebody to read 250 pages, all the best, Mohit. I'm always there. I hope it's getting recorded now. Please do. Okay. Of course, I'm also here because Vivek is an old friend. We crossed paths when he was at Reddy and I was at Nokia. And then I was on the board of Godrej for 9 years. And I've seen Vivek move from being the head of the family office to the CEO of Godrej Consumer Products. Sunder, I know only recently thanks to the book. Okay, so my paths with him have not crossed much. Okay, but absolutely delighted to be here. Before I start, question. How many of you are jealous? Yeah, jealous.
Everybody's jealous.
No. Some people, obvious, some people no.
I'm jealous how you read so many books.
Okay, so half the room says they're jealous. Fantastic. How many of you are possessive? Again, half the room or more than. Okay, fantastic. So a lot of the people are both jealous and possessive. Very good. Then I'm not the odd man. So very good. Now there's a reason why I'm saying that. Okay, and the reason is Radhika, will you please stand up? My editor, where is that? That's Radhika Marwa of Penguin. She's been my editor in Penguin since 2019. Okay, an absolute wonderful lady. She was editor of the year 2022. 2022 editor of the year across India, etc. Absolutely fabulous. If any of you want to write a book, she's the person to contact. So she's the right person. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, so I asked you a question on jealousy and possessiveness. Okay, unfortunately, Radhika's husband and father-in-law are not here. Otherwise, I wanted to say this in front of them. Okay, so I'm not jealous that Vivek went to Harvard. I'm not jealous that the two of them wrote a book. I'm not jealous that these guys have had very good careers, etc. But I'm very jealous that I've had an editor for the last 5 years. Okay, and these guys have stolen her from me.
We can all share.
Really jealous about that. Because I am possessive about my editors. So these two fellows have stolen her in the last 1.5 years. After we knowing her for the last 5-6 years. So this book, is about careers. And I think they've done a fabulous job of putting down what I call the 10 commandments of a good career. They've done a fabulous job of that. But gentlemen, you don't know the first commandment of publishing. Thou shalt not commit thy friend's editor.
She's out now.
Thou shalt not commit thy friend's editor. First rule of publishing. Unfortunately, the friends have broken that. So, anyway, I'm here to have this.
There's no second book happening now, right?
Not with other kind.
Unless we put three together, Shiv, now, so.
So on that lighter note, so I'll start my set of questions for these guys. What events or circumstances or triggers led you to write this book?
Thanks, Shiv. Wonderful to be here. I think, over the last, I've had a 21-year career, and at least specifically in the last 10 years, outside of any business or commercial review that I've done with teams, every other conversation invariably has been about careers. So it's either a stay or go type of conversation. It's about, hey boss, the appraisal season's here. What do I need to do to sort of get the right numbers? How do I make shifts from function A to function B? Hey, I'm thinking of quitting and starting up. What are your thoughts around that? So that had seemed to be, the pattern and tone over the last 10 years. So it became very clear to me that there's a clear demand. And then on the supply side of things, when we looked at the market, we felt there's a whole lot of advisory out there, especially on social platforms. A lot of that is interesting, coming from creators, influencers. We just felt there's room for people with some lived experience to talk about what works, what doesn't. So one of the things we've tried to be thoughtful of in the book is no hyperbole, no clickbaity type of stuff. I mean, we're operators. This is what we do on a day-to-day basis, coach and mentor people, get coached and mentored ourselves. So the idea is to say, talk about some real principles of what's happening in the enterprise environment as we see it today, and therefore how could we codify so that people are not making some of the errors that we made in the first 30 years as an example. Do you want to add to that?
No, I think ultimately the book is about the stuff we wish we had known when we were starting out. Today there is so much advisory out there, but we felt like the younger generation today has so many opportunities, Shiv, but none of us could have imagined when we were young. At the same time, the kind of challenges they're dealing with, whether it's mental health, whether it is social media, whether it's uncertainty, make things so much more complex. And so if we could be a guide, or if we could be a compass that could actually enable us to be able to at least contribute a little bit in shaping the next generation, that would be a huge impact for us at this stage of our lives.
That's fantastic. The question which I've seen some of my bosses do a joint book, etc. is never easy.
Yeah.
That's one thing I've recognized. Because I started on a joint book with one of my bosses, and then very quickly we said, it doesn't work between the two of us. So how do you guys decide to do a joint book? And what are the pulls and pressures of doing a joint book? What were areas both of you violently agreed on? And what are areas where you violently disagree? And who was your mediator when you disagreed?
Radhika. No, I think, ultimately, there are three, I think, filters or criteria which are important in any co-founder or co-authoring relationship. One is alignment on objectives and values. What's the mission? How aligned and excited are we feeling about the mission? Second is, do we actually have complementary skill sets? And the third is, should there be differences beyond arm wrestling? How do you find a way to actually resolve those differences? So Sunder and I spent a couple of months just thinking about who to focus the book on, what the target audience is. We spoke to about almost 100 Gen Z professionals just to get their feedback. And then that time that we spent really helped us figure out, look, actually we are very aligned on the core mission. That's very important, because once you're aligned on the objective, things become very easy. Second is, both of us had fairly complementary skill sets. I'm generally much better at bigger picture thinking, connecting the dots. And Sundar was extremely structured in terms of making sure that each chapter was done on a weekly basis, making sure that all the relevant quotes, etc., were coming in. So the entire project management piece, along with his ideas, really helped. That was a complementary part. And the third is, I think, once we were aligned, whenever we had the occasional, differences, we went back to saying, look, what would be right for the customer? And once you have that lens, I think things became easier.
Yep.
A career is lived forward but understood backward. It's only when you are, let's say, you've done your first CEO stint, then you look back and you say, what led to this?
Yeah.
You do your second CEO stint, then you look back and you say, how did this happen? So you never plan a career, you prepare for it. Yeah. That's my learning. The second one I would say is, especially for young people here, or even senior people, I give you a stat. Somebody who's born in India today will live to be 89 or 90. Somebody who's born in Western Europe last year will live to be 100. Now, you have to rethink what a career is in the context of your lifespan. The old logic of 25 years study, 25 years career, 10 years, 15 years retirement is no longer valid. Yeah. Today, people will extend their careers to 75. They will do what I call paid jobs and unpaid jobs. So when you talk of contribution, a legacy of a contribution is possibly when you start being a CEO and after that. When you start your board roles, when you start your trust roles, etc. So that's the way I see a career.
Very powerful.
Can I just add, actually, I think it's fantastic. I mean, both of you in a way are sort of shining examples, right? You guys have done your multiple chief exec roles and still continue to be fairly active operationally in a portfolio of things that you now handle. So I think that's a great example even for the
shows how old we are. He's making fun of our age now. Thank you, Sundar.
I think, the whole idea to say, well, you reach this milestone and that's it. I think, it just keeps expanding as you go along.
So, all of us make mistakes in career. I don't think I've ever met anybody who said I didn't make a mistake. Okay. So, in your study, in your research, what are the typical mistakes people make when they're junior managers, when they're middle managers, when they're senior managers, and when they're CEOs? Right. What are the typical mistakes that you've seen? I'm sure you've gone through the ranks, you've seen them, okay, and you say, look, that's wrong, whatever this guy or girl is doing. So what are the typical mistakes people make?
Right. I think at the junior stage in the first few years of one's career, the two biggest mistakes we've seen people make is chasing promotions and titles too quickly. And number two is not enough focus on execution. And just getting your execution chops right to be able to nail whatever deliverables you're assigned to. As people start becoming middle managers, I think the challenge is about learning how to lead a team, because this is the first time you get into team leadership roles. And Sundar and I were talking this morning. The dilemma is, how do you learn how to be a player coach? So how do you know where to add value versus aggregating value? How do you know the mix between delegating and empowerment? How do you know the mix between becoming a specialist and a generalist? Those are some of the challenges mid-managers end up facing. In senior leadership, the two biggest, I think, roadblocks that I have seen, one is influencing skills, not knowing really how to influence all your stakeholders. And the second is broadly what I call strategic skills, not knowing how to zoom in and zoom out. And particularly at the CEO stage, the two, I think, challenges I've seen, one is inability to be able to manage multiple stakeholders. And the second is to be able to communicate a much more cohesive strategic direction or narrative for the company. To add, Sundar?
Yeah, I think, I'll reflect on some of the mistakes I've made and I talk about it in the book as well. I think in the early part of the career, the mistake was to assume too much self-importance. So, and therefore operate from that model of, well, you are sort of the center of the world and everything has to work as per you. And that didn't obviously work out too well because it ended up pissing a whole lot of people, right? So that is in the early stages. As I became more senior, more recently, the mistake I made was I was in a country head role for a multinational, leading a large team. And here now I was trying to prove why the company, they made the decision to make me the country head were right. So telling people, how smart the company was because they brought me into the role. Again, I lost 6 months. And, one of the things I've learned is business errors can be fixed quite quickly. I mean, you make a GTM mistake, you make a commercial decision that doesn't work out, you can turn it back. I think my experience generally has been whenever I've made people mistake, it's taken me years to mend that. Whenever I've been rash to people, whenever I've sort of made a decision in impulse because I'm driven by some other agenda, that's taken me multiple years to fix. So one of the things I try to be conscious of now is to over-invest and ensure that I'm not getting the people element wrong. The commercial element, I'm a little more, fluid with those. Yeah.
What are your views, Shiv?
I would say, when you're a junior manager, let me start by asking myself, what's the role of each of the layers?
Yeah.
When you're a junior manager, your only job is to execute.
Yeah.
If you're doing anything but execution, you're in the wrong job. So the mistake I've seen a lot of junior managers make is they want to show their intellectual capacity and strategize. Big mistake, If you don't execute, there's no strategy.
Right.
Okay, so that's the first mistake I find when you're a junior manager. When you're a middle managers forget that they are the halfbacks in football. They're running up and down. The halfbacks in football run 10 kilometers every match. You feed the execution line. You also block the competition moves. Okay. Many times, middle managers forget both the roles. That you have to enable at one level and you have to block and tackle at another level. Okay, that's something that they make a mistake with. Okay, they see themselves as we are serving our bosses. Okay, so that's a middle manager mistake. Senior managers, the role of a senior manager is to manage the complexity in the organization. And as Vivek said, complexity invariably involves emotions in dealing with people. And the ability to make other people see your point of view and equally for you to see other people's points of view is a challenge.
Yeah.
You believe you are the smartest guy in the room and you've thought through it. But that's not the point. You're shooting off the 100-meter track, but you have to carry the other guys also. There's a relay there. You can't just run your 100 meters well. The other 3 guys have to run well too. And as a CEO, and I'll be very specific on India right now, forget the rest of the world. The biggest mistake CEOs in India are making is they take themselves too seriously.
What do you mean by that?
They always want to be bigger than the company. They think they are the reason for the company's success. A CEO is one of the reasons for a company's success.
Right.
Not the only reason. Okay. They want to be in media. They want to be glorified. These are all the wrong things if you're leading an organization. Any leader should actually watch out for that. So I think you mentioned the expression, drinking their own Kool-Aid. I think CEOs should stop doing it. Okay. And the second thing I would say in the season of results, they're blaming everybody else except taking accountability.
Yeah.
Look at all the FMCG CEOs. They blame the government, middle class is shrinking, that is shrinking, etc. What the hell are you doing? Yeah. No, you have a role to play. What are you accountable for? If all you are saying is the GDP is not growing, hence I cannot grow, then the role of a CEO is that of a fax machine. We'll send in the GDP numbers and he will tell us what he will do. What do we need him?
So true.
So those are the mistakes that I see. Anyway, it's not about me, it's about you guys. Okay. One of the things I noticed about industries today, and Vivek, you've seen this from your consulting days, the boundary lines of industries are shifting.
Yeah.
They're merging, thanks to technology, etc., etc. Okay. For example, an FMCG classical boundary line was physical distribution, go there, get it done. Suddenly you have the Q-commerce boys and the e-commerce boys, and suddenly who is the FMCG company and who is the distributor is a big question.
Yeah.
Okay, so technology is diffusing the boundary lines of every industry. So how does one look at a cross-industry career? How should one think about it?
Well, one of the things we say in the book is, as you're thinking about shifts, think on the adjacencies, right? That's a model that we've used to say, hey, you know what, think on the adjacencies of both industry models, but I think more importantly, adjacencies of your functional skills. Every functional skill has a natural extension to another functional skill. Your ability to map it out and say, well, what is this closest to? And how does that take you closer to whatever is the core of the context of the business in which you operate? I think that's a pragmatic way, because sometimes what happens is you may believe that you've got all the transferable skills. Let's say as an example, to go from maybe an enabling function to the chief exec role. Well, your enterprise may not be willing to take such a bet. right? So you've got to do those pit stops to build enough confidence in the enterprise to say, yeah, you've got a background, may not be conventional, but you have demonstrated experience of delivering results, and that just builds confidence. So just being pragmatic to say, what does it take to succeed in the environment in which you operate? Being aware to say, where do you sit today? And therefore just having that map. So one of the tools that we talk about in the book is what we call a 3-move plan, which is the idea to say, if you're looking at transitions, you've got to at least plan 3 moves. I think the biggest value is in just having the plan, right? I think that itself gives you a competitive edge.
Yeah. I think the other piece I'd add to this is in the book, we talk about the power of slingshots, right? If you're very serious about pivoting and moving to other industries, sometimes it's important to take a step back. And Shiv, as you were saying, given extended lifespans, if people are planning for 3 major phases of careers, a couple of years here or there doesn't make that much of a difference. And sometimes I think people get so focused on what will happen to my promotion trajectory, I'll fall behind my peers, that they don't necessarily take those actions. But sometimes being able to take a step back actually can really propel you much more forward, I think. So I think that's a critical tool which will get more and more necessary. I think particularly, working women have to do that in many times. I think there are examples you have in the book, Sunder, about this, yeah?
So we've got an example which, hopefully many of you would connect with. I had the good fortune of working with the global colleague in a previous company, and she was a global VP of marketing, Shiv, and she wanted to be the CMO. And she realized one of the foundational, sometimes fast growth can do this, right? It can create blind spots. You've got people taking bets on you, and in that momentum, you get to a certain point and you realize, oh gosh, I never did this element of the job. She realized she'd never run a country brand. She'd never run a country marketing team. And then her ability to influence, navigate the local global dynamics is not very mature, right? And she had the courage to say, I'm this global VP of marketing in a large global MNC. I'm going to take a step back, go 2 levels down, become a country marketing director, spend 2 years doing that in Istanbul, right? Build that muscle, demonstrate results, and then go back. Now, completely cognizant that a lot of this is driven by cultural context, societal norms, so it's maybe easier in Europe, the US, not in India. But I think it's a great example. And I think if you marry that with the idea to say your career is going to last 40 years, well, in a year here, a 2 year there, in the longer scheme of things, it really doesn't make such a big difference, right? So,
yeah. So both of you have worked for MNCs and both of you have worked for Indian corporations. What do you see as the fundamental difference between the 2 models?
I was on the leadership team of a global MNC listed in India previously. I'm on the leadership team of an Indian, very well-reputed Indian MNC listed here. I think the 2 models is your ability to, influence and produce results. I think in global MNCs, the closer you are to Singapore, London, US, the faster you can get results. And sometimes what happens is, how significant is the India business to the global scheme of things often becomes a factor in terms of how quickly things move. Indian MNCs, large Indian promoter companies are fairly agile. The difference, I think what Indian companies are now trying to bridge is global MNCs actually have very sophisticated talent management, people practices, global mobility structures. And so if you're a young professional looking at early global exposure, maybe spending some time in a global MNC is smart because it allows you that opportunity. And I think it's a mix of both, right? As you think of your career as a portfolio, if you can add those experiences, do some interesting things with MNCs, do some interesting things with large Indian companies, I think that should be a good balance.
Yeah. And Shiv, I'd love to hear your views on this because you started at HUL, then it was Nokia, then it was PepsiCo, then Aditya Birla, and now Advent. So you've almost had this schizophrenic journey of, doing, Indian MNC, global MNC, over multiple times in your career. I think Sundar's covered it all. And I just wonder if it's no longer a distinction between global MNCs and large Indian companies, because many large Indian companies are MNCs also now. It's probably between big and small and promoter driven versus non-promoter driven companies. And I think, as Sundar said, structure, decision making, and probably careers. I think in a lot of times in Indian companies, access to the promoter or the founder is important from a career point of view. Careers are not that structured, but decision making tends to be faster it's slightly more entrepreneurial, whereas large companies have bigger budgets and more structure.
Yeah. So I would say the way I look at it is, I give the analogy of trees. A global MNC is like a redwood tree.
Yeah.
It grows tall, and they focus on their core and say, let's keep growing this. What's the total addressable market? How big can we be? And then they will look at adjacencies and then something else. So the global MNC model is one of a redwood tree model. The Indian MNC model is more like a banyan tree. Okay, because every Indian family has 4 children, 4 uncles, 4 grandaunts, whatever it is. So the banyan tree grows, and then the roots go down and establish another business. So because you need to have a range of businesses to take care of each of the family members. Okay, so the Indian model is much more banyan tree model. So in philosophy of growth terms, it's the redwood with the banyan tree. But more important, what I have seen is that Indian owners, and now I'm on a few Indian boards, etc. Indian owners tend to value loyalty ahead of capability. And I think that's a serious challenge in my opinion. You can have 10% of your organization as loyalists, but you need 90% capable people in a fast-changing world. If you have 50% of your organization as loyalists, then you're not going to win.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one. In the MNC, all MNCs are matrix today. The trouble with MNCs is all managers who work in MNCs, we want to show our bosses wherever they're sitting how intelligent we are. Our skill comes through articulation. Our skill comes in showing what's right or what's wrong. Even after a decision is made, so we're in budget season right now, even after a decision is made on capital allocation for January 1, by March we'll bring that up again in a meeting, say, look, I told you so.
Right.
You can't do that in an Indian company.
Yes. Right.
In an Indian company, the owner has decided December 31st, the clock changes, full stop.
Right.
There's no more argument after that. Okay, so these are the fundamental differences that I've seen between an MNC and an Indian organization.
Yeah.
One of the things which I noticed, to my surprise, maybe not surprise, every time I speak in a business school in India, before I start, I ask them, how many of you want to be CEOs? 99% of the hands go. So I joke that for MBAs today, there are only 2 jobs. MT to MD, managing director to managing director. That's it. They don't want anything in between. So question for you, do you think the job of a CXO and CEO is overhyped?
I wouldn't say it's overhyped. I think it probably is over-idealized. It is not a fantasy of power and prestige. The role is, I think, a marathon of responsibility, trade-offs, and impact. I think for people who are ready to embrace the grind, it's a wonderful job. But if for people who are trying to just chase the title, I think it can be a very fast ticket to a burnout. What people don't realize is it's a very lonely job, first of all. The kind of scrutiny a CXO has is huge. And while people think CXOs have so much under control, the more senior you get, the less control you have about your calendar, about the stakeholders you have to end up managing. So it's a very complex role, but it can be very gratifying for the right reasons. If you truly want to shape the direction of a company, if you want to build institutions, if you want to nurture and groom the next generation, I think for those reasons, it can be a very, very satisfying job. But if you do it for the wrong reasons, I think it's very over-idealized.
We try to be intentional about it, but we'll try to, if we were doing it again, we'll be even less Socrative, so to say. More templates, more toolkits, because, the classic thing, whatever we have is landing quite well with our readers. And the classic question when we're working typically, with young managers in our teams, right? After all the philosophy is done, they're like, "Tika boss karna kya?"
Right.
Right? So, what are the 3 things you want me to do? And I think that lands really well. So really more tactical to say, go make this happen. So prescriptive, given the audience we're talking to, but not preachy, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. With that, I open it to the audience. Please feel free to ask any question you want. Nothing's off the table. Yes, Srishti, audience. Is there a mic, man?
Can you just take one of these? Yeah. Thank you.
And of course, please.
execution is very important.
I think we can't hear you.
And better?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm just asking that in initial years you just mentioned that execution is more important and we should be focusing on that rather than the communication. And right now just mentioned that
Please go.
it's got confusion.
Please go.
Maybe getting more clarity on how to have good communication skills, working on that as well. And also second question that I wanted to ask was that if we are just focusing on execution in the initial years, and certainly we are getting into management positions in the middle age, then suddenly how can I just all of a sudden be having those skills basically?
Yeah, please.
I said, please sit down, Srishti. I said at a junior manager level, the role, why a junior manager role exists anywhere in any organization, in any industry, is to execute the strategy. Without execution, there is no role. And I said you must deliver on that execution without fail. Okay, that's absolutely important. Now, you raise a very important point, which I didn't cover. In terms of middle manager, I said they block, etc. The biggest mistake I made as a middle manager, okay, and all of us, and I see this, and it's shown in every Gallup study that I've seen over the last 25 years, is when we get promoted to middle management, that is to manage a team, as you're talking, the mistake we make is we get promoted because we've been great individual contributors. So the moment I became, a branch manager or a senior brand manager, etc., I wanted everybody in my team to follow the same template. How I analyze, how I communicate, etc. Biggest mistake. Because the diversity of the team you don't bring to the table and you don't harness that power. Then you get clones of Shiv Kumar, you get 6 clones of Shiv Kumar, you don't get a team. That's the biggest mistake I made. So when you're a junior manager, what I would suggest is look for trends which are happening out there. If you are focused on execution, does not mean you don't need to think strategically. You can keep thinking strategically all the time, but you need to bring it to bear on your business. I'll give you a live example. Learning failure, whatever you want to call it. Unilever used to have a product called Treetop. I don't know how many of you remember that. Okay, a Tetra Pak fruit drink used to compete with Fruity, etc. Disaster, absolute disaster of it. I used to be the area sales manager in Chennai. How did we do it? We did it the same way as Hindustan Lever always does. 3 weeks or 4 weeks of inventory with the stockist, go to the market, supply it, come back. And we were failing day in and day out. So Rishi Bhattacharya, whom I have a lot of respect for, he was a director, an absolute fantastic thinker on marketing and strategy. He came to the market. When we were failing so badly, I was the area sales manager. I went and spoke to all the soft drink boys. I spoke to the 77, Mr. Krishna Swami, I still remember that old man. I spoke to him. I spoke to the ex-Coke guys. I spoke to the ex-Pepsi guys, etc. And told them, hey guys, how does your industry work? We are damn good at selling soap, detergent, etc. But we just have no clue about your industry. Then they told me, Shiv, in our industry, execution is season to season. We expand distribution, we contract distribution. You guys never do that. That's the lesson I learned from those guys, my competitors. So Rishi came to the market. Disaster of a visit. Sales not good, product came back. So he said, Shiv, obviously this is not working well. What would you recommend? I said, Rishi, we are running it the wrong way. He said, what do you mean by that? I said, we are running soft drinks the way we run detergents and soaps and tea. That's not the way it works. The soft drink industry works on these principles. He heard me out and he said, that's right, Shiv. Go and do this experiment in Chennai Metro. Go ahead. You have my permission. The moment we left him in the airport, okay, for his flight back to Bangalore, my boss, I won't name him, he turned to me and said, Shiv, you put your head in the lion's mouth. Now you get out of it. I'm not backing you. I said, okay. I called my sales team next day and said, hey, you guys wanted low inventory, etc. This is what we're going to do. We went to 1 lakh trace selling. So the point is, while it was an execution job, learning about the strategic principles of how execution works for soft drink was very important. That's what it was.
Another question. So you just mentioned it could be sensitive as well to anybody in the room right now. You mentioned that if you be firms, usually it's the loyalty that kills. And if you're a horse, that is not encouraged. And dog, basically, I'm pretty sorry to use this word, but is more loyal. So, is there any tips, like considering we are in the Indian market and we have a lot of firms, lot of big organizations which are being run by Indian families, and we are seeing that happening. Any suggestion to probably navigate it?
Shrishti, you have to think about what fosters loyalty. At the end of the day, the Indian promoter is far more value focused than any other global multinational because they have the owner's mindset. So they will definitely prioritize and reward loyalty to a point. But the best way to win loyalty is actually delivering. If you deliver, you are going to be the right-hand person of the founder or the promoter. If you don't deliver, you may have a slightly longer leash, but guess what? At some point, there will not be even a 3 months notice. It will be like leaving. So I've seen that happening in multiple times. So clearly, they prioritize loyalty, but ultimately loyalty is based on actually delivering whatever their expectations of value might be.
Would that mean just staying in the same organization for a long time with them? Like considering, I mean, obviously it's like a marathon that you eventually but
See, to me, the decision to stay in an organization and a decision to join something else are two very different decisions. And you have to be clear about why you want to stay, what keeps you staying in that organization, and if you want to leave and join something else, why do you want to do that? In our book, we talk about the push-pull matrix. So I think it's far more important to think about it that way, regardless of whether you're working with a promoter or a founder or an MNC. The same approach will apply there, I think.
Hi, very enriching discussion. Thank you for that. My question is, once you get towards the senior leadership, how important is it to be a rebel? Be a rebel. Break the organizational boundaries. And I'm not talking about outside, I'm not talking about market boundaries. I'm saying looking inside. Large organizations typically have a very diverse and very, people are enamored by the organizational governance framework, this, that, etc. How important does it become as a senior leader to really at times break that? How much?
Well, I think, sorry, what's your name?
Abhishek.
Abhishek, the GMR guy, he's the one we thank for host, yes.
Abhishek, thank you for that question. So I think, look, if you meant be a rebel in the context of be courageous, be bold, break boundaries, have an experimental mindset, I think all of those are true. But one of the narratives we also see is this whole, don't be the asshole that we spoke about earlier. I think we're seeing a lot of narratives of unnecessary chutzpah, unnecessary heroism. I think one can stay away from that. We see so many examples. I mean, I work in a large Indian company where you've got very senior leaders, chief execs, who are just really nice people, right? So to that extent, I think it's not an either or. You can be a very senior leader and you can be a very regular, really nice person, somebody you can sit down and have a simple conversation with. But at the same time, these are people who also make very bold decisions. These are people who have an intrinsic appetite for taking risks. They have an appetite for spotting opportunities. So if that's what you meant by being rebel, absolutely go for it. But if there's any personality sort of annexures associated with it, I think we've seen enough examples. We need more nicer leaders would be my argument. So,
I think the only nuance I would add, Abhishek, is if you're a senior leader in a public company, right? Public companies have quarterly pressures, right? And they get rewarded for consistent performance. So sometimes being a rebel, if that means shaking things up, which leads to volatility in performance, I don't think that's that easily done in a public company setting. That's the practical reality, is that if you're delivering, quarter over quarter consistent results, sometimes the abilities to be bold can get constrained. It can still happen, but that's the one practical challenge, I think, which is much more about, public companies versus non-public companies. I think the freedom and flexibility probably is slightly more to take those bold moves when you're private. And Shiv, works with Advent, so he advises lots of, very, very bright founders and promoters running private companies, so he can talk about it. In the public setting, one has to be slightly more practical about this, I think.
I'll just add a quick one before we take the last question, which is very simple. If you're breaking a rule, if you're flying close to the edge, my simple submission is ensure that your boss is informed well before.
Right.
I cannot tell you more important than that. Because when the biomass hits the ceiling, the last thing you want your boss to say is, I didn't know about it.
Especially when you're selling Tetra Pak, juices, right? Keto.
Don't ever do that. Last question. Yes, please.
Yeah, please.
I really thoroughly enjoyed the entire session. So, Vivek, one thing you mentioned was if you need to be successful in your career, you need to be passionate about something and you need to really love that thing. So, I basically turned 27, but I still not been able to figure out how you are passionate about a certain thing. So, how do you figure that out? There are certain people who figure it out at a really young age, but then how do you
Yeah, I'll rephrase this, Pimvada. I think passion is overrated, right? From a career point of view, right? Lots of us may have lots of passions outside of work, but passions may not lead to either money or a successful career. So sometimes if your work is your passion and you find it all together, that's amazing. But for most of us, unlikely that's going to end up happening. Second of all, be kind to yourself, right? Experiment, try different things, see what you enjoy doing, learn to work with different kinds of people. And over time, I think the picture becomes a little bit clearer. And I always tell people, look, what you like, what your interests are will actually keep on evolving. As you get more exposure, if you talk to, as Shiv was saying, 2 people outside your industry every month, suddenly it starts sparking new ideas. Those new ideas lead to new opportunities. So my suggestion is keep it organic, keep on having fun, keep on learning, keep on growing, be curious. And through that, some passions may develop. Those passions might lead to your work. If it doesn't, you can still find a lot of joy and fulfillment in whatever you are doing, even though it may not be actually your passion.
Can I just add? So the only other thing I would add is you're not alone. You've got company. I haven't figured it out myself. So, like Vivek said, look, the way to think about it, there are things that we all enjoy doing. So if you can generally find yourself in situations where the tasks at hand are things that you generally enjoy and get on with, you're in a good place. Don't confuse yourself too much with, is this my singular passion? Think more about, am I liking? Is this something I look forward to? And one step at a time, and maybe you figure it out sooner. So, right.
Big round of applause.